everybody, and welcome to the music rating, ranking, and reviewing podcast that we like to call Music Meltdown, which we rate, rank, and review any artist's discography, songs, musical topics, really whatever comes to mind. In part 3 of the Album of the Year series, talking about 1965, where most people start out their series because this really is a landmark in the birth of the album, really where things start to become a bit more cohesive and you truly have these larger, more direct artistic statements here. Tons of big name artists putting out releases, tons of really cool debuts. Acts like the Zombies, the Hollies, you have the Yardbirds starting out, O'Brummels, ton of the 60s pop stuff, as well as some cooler albums from Motown and some harder rocking stuff. Just a really big year for releases and a lot of stuff to pick from. It just depends on what your personal preference is going into this, I believe. That being said, however, I like this year a good bit. I think that this year is definitely the best that we've covered so far, just due to depth alone. And I believe Andrew probably echoes that sentiment.
I would agree. It's a pretty notable step forward in all regards. This is kind of where you see the almost like an arms race in terms of who can outduel each other in terms of, creative advancement. So great year. I'm going to have lots of favorite records for this year to talk about. So it was almost a shame that I could only do 5. And I guess I'll kick it off with my runner-up was Pastel Blues, Nina Simone, with her unique, lushly produced vocal jazz. The epic closer, Cinnamon, warrants conversation on its own. But my number 5 went to Help by the Beatles. And I actually might have this a slight step up for me from even their winner last year, which goes to show how strong of a year this one stands to me. You get the rise of the folk pop influence on this one. The title track and Ticket to Ride are huge songs, and I've always adored the tenderness of Yesterday. So great record. They're doing their thing and pushing it forward. And my number 4, go back to Bob Dylan with Bringing It All Back Home. Much like how the Beatles introduced folk to their stuff, Bob Dylan adds electric to his arsenal. A super strong collection of songs, particularly the opening and closing 4. I'm a big fan of the rapid fire Subterranean Homesick Blues. Dylan's takes on love, like She Belongs to Me and Love Minus Zero No Limit. On the acoustic end, Mr. Tambourine Man, It's All Over Now, Baby Blue. Lots of classics here. Number 3 is Today by the Beach Boys. Notable for being split into 2 distinct sides here, the more up-tempo pop on side A and the ballad-heavy side B. Brian Wilson's production continues to advance throughout, but I think it's that second half that really hits the sweet spot for me. The melodies just go to unexpected places that work well with this Baroque pop arrangements. The run from Please Never Wonder to what is ostensibly the closer in the back of my mind, that run there always blows me away. Number 2, Highway 61 Revisited by Bob Dylan. He pushes ahead on his incredible run of this era, opening with probably his signature song, Like a Rolling Stone, and populating the rest with one great track after another. The arrangements feel more developed than ever here, and he's really come into a style of his own by this point. But number 1 will have to be Rubber Soul by the Beatles. And even just like over the course of a few months here, it's amazing to me kind of where they were taking things. This is essentially where my favorite Beatles era begins. The folk rock elements here again, but perhaps some early touches of psychedelia with things like the sitar on Norwegian Wood, which is a personal favorite of mine. I guess if I had to describe it in simple terms, it's like excellent pop rock in a tight package, but they aren't shying away from going just the slightest bit weirder in some of their choices, and it plays so well as a result. So the Beatles with back-to-back wins here for me. Rubber Soul for 65.
Will they go back to back to back? Very, very possible, given that album. But funnily enough, Rubber Soul is actually only my number 7 this year, because I think that there is a ton of depth here. I think that there are just some really killer albums that are less discussed, like my number 6 record, which I kind of thought that you might bring up. It's going to be Begin Here by the Zombies. Really beautiful sort of Baroque pop, beat pop in here as well. Just really fun stuff. Very similar what I can say about this that I said to Stay with the Hollies last year. There's so many great songs across here, and Colin Blunstone as well. Just a really delightful vocalist, even though I don't quite put him on the level that I know that some people do. Now, 65, I have one record at 4 stars, and I have 4 records at 4.5 in this top 5. A pretty big far cry from last year, which only had 2 4.5. So things are getting better with my number 5 slot, which is going to be A Love Supreme by John Coltrane. I just heard this for the first time in February, and everything that people say about it is correct. It's pretty much the magnum opus of jazz up to this point, just a truly all-encompassing, delightful record front to back, filled with incredible arrangements and just absolutely sensational playing, much like any jazz record should. Number 4 for me, going to be an album that I think is going to raise some eyebrows because not really one that people generally think of, but I think is really excellent Motown material. I'm going with second album by the Four Tops. I think that this record is just absolutely spectacular. It's really just building off of that really fun, really delightful Motown sound with some of the just best melodies and vocals that you're going to get anywhere. Levi Stubbs, of course, being the highlight of the group, just absolutely spectacular. Shouts to Tom. Loves that guy. I can't help myself. Is there anything that I can do? It's the same old song, Helpless. Just so much good material across here. Number 3 for me, however, is going to be Mr. Tambourine Man by the Byrds. Really the birth of sort of that folk rock sound, I would say, filled with just incredibly strong musicians that don't get to play on this record. Primarily, I believe the Wrecking Crew and other studio musicians did the playing across here, and it shows because it's just an incredibly tight-knit, beautiful package with some of the best harmony vocals that you'll get throughout the entire decade. I'd say their harmony vocals would rival even that of the Beach Boys. I just love them. Number 2 is going to be our one point of overlap, Highway 61 Revisited. Really just hard to deny this record. Like a Rolling Stone is one of the greatest songs of all time. I think Tombstone Blues is incredibly strong. It's just front to back. I think that all of these songs are really incredible, except Desolation Row, which is way too long, but I still like it. Really nothing bad to say about it. Of course, this was his second record after we went electric, and I think he's just fine-tuning the sound here and just pouring out some incredible material. But number 1 is from the artist that just missed out in 1964 making my list. It's going to be Otis Blue by Otis Redding. Once again, just an incredible soul record. Otis Redding has one of the greatest vocals just in general for that style. There's just front to back. I don't think that there's a dull moment on here. Every song is just a slam dunk success. And it's really hard to deny this one because it's just so good. You got covers of stuff like My Girl, which I think he has the definitive version on here. It's Gonna Come. You have his cover of Don't Want No Satisfaction, which is very good. Really just front to back. It's an incredibly strong material. And of course, just all of the studio playing the musicians across here really just bring it all together in a totally spectacular package. So my winner for 1965 is going to be Otis Blue by Otis.
Very nice. I'm glad one of us was able to get him on there. He definitely would have made my top 10. And he's another one who wouldn't have had much more chance to be represented on these lists, so, unfortunately.
I'm not sure if I'd say that, but it is what it is. I don't know.
Well, I mean, he only had like Knee Die in a year or two after that.
Yeah, true, but he still put out some really strong records. I know Vanessa, for one, actually prefers Follow Up the Soul album, which is kooky talk to me, but you do you.
I can't quite. I think Otis Blue is the one for me. But
same.
Yeah.
But yeah, 65. I mean, I guess it's a pretty good year. Tons of really strong material. It kind of just goes to show the depth. Once again, we have 1 point of overlap in the entire year, and even then, some of the stuff I put on there, you're like, no, weaker year. I feel like what you were saying earlier, a lot of the best stuff from 65 could easily beat 63, 64. It's just kind of a shame that music had to basically start here and we went further back.
I think earlier on, you got to be more emphasis on singles, I guess, because it was the singles era, at least for pop rock. So,
Absolutely.
But yeah, for albums, this is where it really begins, at least for those kind of genres, for sure.
Absolutely. That being said, though, those were our top fives of 1965. I really hope that you enjoyed this. Hope that you give us your list down below, and that you all have a great one.